Dean Homiuni back with you again, and we're going to go over some relatively detailed information in this lesson where we are going to revisit BBC color balance, auto levels, and BCC video scope. And we originally looked at this kind of early on, and I said that we would come back to it. I usually use auto levels and then wind up adjusting my colors. I don't necessarily worry about the video scopes too much, but we're going to take a look at some very detailed information because the package you may use may not have that great auto levels technology that Adobe brought over from Photoshop. And as all of you know, Adobe is a very wide breadth creative software company, probably the largest in the world, where their breadth of products include Premiere Pro, CC that we're demoing these products on, Adobe After Effects, the de facto standard for special effects, Adobe Illustrator, once again, another de facto industry standard, Adobe Photoshop that we've all heard about, Adobe Dreamweaver, their web development tool, and a host of all other programs. We talked about before that Adobe had brought over some of their color correction technology, and auto levels is a great tool, but some of the other packages don't have as good as functionality as that particular function. If you're not using Adobe Premiere Pro, it's going to be critical then to understand the color balance and the video scope in the very beginning before you start your color correction to manually try to get your colors to the point that typically that Adobe Auto Levels gets you there somewhat automatically. So with that being said, we're going to watch about a 10-minute video that came off the Boris FX website for Boris Continuum Complete that discusses video scope. The demonstration of the product is actually done on Avid Media Composer, and therefore it's not going to have the same interface. I don't want you to be worried about the interface. I want you to listen to the discussion about what they use these video scopes for, and also safe colors is regarding broadcast levels. Now, if you're doing this for home use, you don't really care about broadcast level and that it's actually complying with the standards, but I think you're going to hear a lot of interesting information. And after the video is over, I'm going to come in and we're actually going to apply it to some clips and we're going to talk about the concept. So with that being said, I'm going to leave for now while you all wind up watching this really good video. It's going to get into a lot of minutia, but once again, the main thing is during this 10-minute discussion to just come out and understand some of the concepts of what they're doing.
Hey everyone, Kevin P. McAuliffe here, and I am back again with another Boris TV tutorial. And I know you're probably thinking to yourself, well, that's a bit of an odd-looking visual effect. Well, what about this one? No? Well, believe it or not, you're not looking at any type of effect to stylize your footage. What you're actually looking at is a great feature inside of the awesome BCC video scope effect that is not only going to make sure that all of your luminance values are within safe areas, but it's also going to speed up your overall color correcting workflow as well. And in this tutorial, I want to take a look at two things. First and foremost is how important the setup of this effect is. It's very simple to set up, but if you don't do it correctly, you're going to run into problems very quickly. And secondly, I want to show you how to do a simple color correction, believe it or not, without having to look at a single scope at all. Okay, let's quit out of QuickTime and let's Alt-Tab into Avid Symphony. And obviously we need some footage to start with. So what I'm going to do is just navigate over to my bin, and instead of importing, what I'm going to do is right click and simply say link to AMA file. I'm going to select this elephant shot, and this is footage that I shot here. There we go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the entire clip by hitting T on the keyboard. That's on both Mac and Windows. I'm going to hit B again on both Mac and Windows to edit that clip into my timeline. And now how most people apply video scope is they'll take the effect and drag it and drop it onto each shot that they want to take a look at, which in most cases is actually your entire timeline. And there's actually an easier way to do it than that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to press Control and Y in Windows, Command and Y on the Mac to create a new empty video layer. What I'm going to do now is hit Control and 8 on Windows, Command and 8 on the Mac, and I'm going to navigate down to the video scope effect, and that can be found inside of BCC 8, inside of color and tone, and it's located right down here at the bottom of the color and tone section right here, video scope. And what I'm going to do is simply take it and I'm going to drag it down and drop it onto this empty layer of video. What I can do now, you'll see nothing has happened, and the reason that nothing has happened is because I'm simply just not looking at the layer. There we go. There are my different scopes. Now in this tutorial, I'm only going to be using the video scope effect. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come in, that's actually the waveform monitor that I'm going to use. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come into the effect here by simply stepping into effects mode. And in my case, stepping into effects mode is done by using Shift and Y. Now if you don't have effects mode mapped onto your keyboard, you can simply find it right here, or you can find it right here at the top of your timeline. So like I said, I'm going to be using the waveform monitor only. So what I'm going to do is just turn off the other scopes, and I'm going to turn up the scale. I'm just going to adjust the scale parameter here to make this scope pretty much as big as the screen, because I want to see what's going on here. Now most people would look at this and immediately think to themselves, well, you know what, I'm in good shape. Everything falls right here within 0 and 100 on my scope, so I'm all set to go. I don't even need to worry about this shot. This is fantastic. So what's going to happen is they're going to go through, they're going to edit their entire piece, they're going to export it, or send it to tape. They're going to send it off to the station, and the station's going to reject it, and they're not going to know why. They're going to say, what's going on? This video scope tells me that everything is fine. Well, let's actually take a look at a different scope. Now, I'm using Symphony, so we're going to take a look at this inside of Symphony. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come into color correction mode right here, color correction, and you'll see that color correction's Y waveform is giving me a different reading than BCC8's video scope effect. As you'll see, I've got some colors in here that are outside of the bright safe area. It's over 100, but you'll see inside of this scope, it's not the same. So what is going on? Well, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to switch back to source record editing for a second, because you'll remember in the intro I told you that the setup is probably the most important part of working with this effect. So what I'm going to do again, I'm going to step into effects mode, Shift and Y is my shortcut, or again, effects mode right here, effects mode right here. What we're going to do is just expand out our window a little bit here. And what I need to do first of all is I need to tell the effect that I'm actually working in 601 color space or luminance range right here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drop that down, and you'll see right now the luminance range is set to RGB 0 to 255. What I want to do is actually set this up for D1 16 to 235 because I've captured this footage. You'll see as soon as I switch that, what I have now, if I switch back to the Symphony color correction mode, is you'll see if I look at the Symphony scope and I look at the scope from BCC8's video scope effect, you can see they're now representative of each other. We have outside of legal here and here, outside of legal here and here. Very good. You'll see, like I said, setup, probably the most important thing. Once we have this setup, we can see we've got some issues going on with this footage. So let's simply switch back here to source record editing. Again, I'm going to step into effects mode. And what I want to do is I actually want to have a visual representation of what is going on. You'll remember in the intro I showed you the zebra bars and the magenta on top of the footage. Now, how did I actually get that there? What I'm going to do again is just expand out the effects editor, and you're going to see right down here towards the bottom of the effect, inside of the effects editor, we have a section called Broadcast Safe. What I'm going to do is drop that down, and you're going to see the very first option we have is something called logging mode. Now right now we're set to render only, but what's cool about the video scope effect is that we can actually have it log all of the problems with a specific shot. So you can actually get a text document that's going to tell you what parts of the shot are outside of legal limits. So you'll see a very cool request that was actually asked for by you guys that was implemented by the team working on this effect. Now in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave this to render only, and what I want to make sure that I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this on the scope, and what I want to do is on the highlight on source, for right now I'm just going to turn on the zebra pattern. Now once I have zebra pattern turned on, you're going to see if I come up and I turn the waveform monitor off, nothing's happening, everything is still the same. Well, that's because I actually have to tell the effect what is outside of a certain limit that I'm going to set. So what I'm going to do is navigate right down below the highlight on source, zebra, and I'm going to adjust the Luma upper threshold. And you'll see as soon as I grab the slider bar, you're going to notice a red dot appear up here in the upper right hand corner of the waveform monitor. And what I'm going to do is just drag down, and you'll see as I start to drag, that scope is starting to turn pink. And what I want to do is crop this right off, maybe just a little bit below 100. And you'll see as soon as I do that, what's now happened is that the zebra bars have now appeared in the shot. And you'll see if I step out of effects mode for a second here, let's just come back here, I'm just going to hit Y, which is my shortcut to get back into edit mode. You'll see as I drag through, those zebra bars are alive, showing me up here in the sky, even a little bit in the water, somewhere on the ground here, what is outside of safe areas. Now what's actually very cool as well is I can actually now come in and I can turn the waveform monitor off altogether and take a look at that. I can now see I have a visual representation without actually even needing to see a scope of what's illegal in my shot. Now the only problem is that I can start to adjust this, but it might actually get to be a little bit difficult to see when I get everything. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to switch back in here. I'm going to come back to highlight on source. I'm just going to turn this to magenta because guess what? That's a lot easier to see what's going on. You'll see now there's absolutely no question as to what is problem areas inside this shot. Now, of course, that begs the next question. How do I get in and actually correct this? Well, like I told you before, for me, when I'm doing something that I need to be, down and dirty, quick and simple, I don't like to step in and use the full Symphony color correction mode because then I'm switching back and forth between these different views and it just becomes a lot of work. So what I like to do is I like to use the color correction effect in conjunction with video scope. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Control and 8 on the keyboard to call up the effects palette. Now you can really use any effect. You can even just use the standard. If I come right down here to the image section here, you can even just use the standard Media Composer or Symphony color effect if you wanted to. What I'm going to do is simply take the color correction effect. I'm going to drag it right down here. I'm going to drop it onto my footage. I'm going to step into effects mode. Again, you'll remember Shift and Y is my shortcut for effects mode. I'm going to come up here to the HLS section. I'm just going to activate it. I'm going to drop it down. I'm going to come into controls. I'm going to come into master. And what I want to do is I want to get in and I want to adjust. You'll see right down here at the bottom I have the gain, the gamma, and the setup. Now the gain is what's going to adjust the bright parts of the shot. And all I'm going to do is I'm simply going to start dragging down. And as I start dragging down, you'll see over here in the record window, the zebra bars, or in this case the magenta, is disappearing. Why? Well, I'll tell you why. Because if I step back into the BCC video scope effect and I turn the waveform monitor back on, you'll see now that everything is inside safe, and you'll see that I can do color correction without even needing to see the video scope. A very, very, very handy and quick way to work inside of Media Composer or Symphony. Now, again, if you happen to be using Media Composer, what I can do is just remove that Symphony effect. I'll just hit Control and 8 on the keyboard here. What I'm going to do is simply come to the color effect. I'm going to drag it right down here. I'm going to drop it onto my shot. Now you'll see what has actually happened here is that by applying the color effect to the shot, it's actually cropped everything off just a little bit below or a little bit above our cutoff range here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come into the effect here. I'm going to come all the way up to the top here. And let's just bring our white point down a little bit here. There we go. Very cool. And guess what? Everything is within the legal range that I have set up. So I hope this tutorial again has shown you two things. One, the importance of setting up BCC video scopes correctly so that it's actually telling you the information that you need to know. And secondly, what a powerful feature the broadcast safe section is inside of Videoscope, and how you can actually utilize that instead of having to look at any scopes to do all of the color correction work that you might need to do to make sure that your projects come in within legal limits. So if you have any questions, you have any comments, or you have any tutorial requests, you can send them to support@borisfx.com. This has been Kevin P. McAuliffe. Thanks a lot for watching.
So after watching the video, which was from Boris FX, clearly there was a lot of detailed information included in there. And if you didn't get exactly or understand all the concepts, don't worry. Either did I the first time I watched it. To be honest with you, I've watched that video about 6 or 7 times, and I still learn new stuff when I watch that video every time. Let's go ahead and wind up getting started here. We're in what's called Lesson 7 BCC Videoscope and BCC Color Balance Part 2. So I'm going to turn around and we're going to expand our bins. And what I want you to do is notice where I now added some titles to all these lessons. We were getting 1 through 11. And what I want each of you to do is to go in and set up bins for all of these lessons. Go in and wind up changing these names. And the way to do it is you can just click on Lesson 1, right click and say rename, and then type the name in, or else you can highlight the item and then press on F2, and that will allow you to go correct the names. I'm going to wind up once again stopping it for a little while because we're going to use all these moving forward and set up the new sequences and get the names laid out as I have them in here. and it'll just make it easier for us moving forward. So I'm going to wind up stopping it again, give you about, probably take you 5 or 10 minutes to go in and let's get this stuff organized in a little better manner, because when you go back on your own to look at these tutorials again, I want to make sure that you understand every concept that we went over. Color correction, BCC noise reduction, optical stabilizer, Adobe Warp stabilizer, Sapphire D-band, Sapphire Edge with film style, BCC videoscope and BCC color balance part 2, Red Giant Colorista 2, Flicker Fixer and Color Fixer. Here I have spelling, so I'm just going to click in here, wind up fixing that so I have the right title. Tiffin DFX D-band, and then the sharpen tool from GenArt Sapphire. Go ahead and wind up making these corrections. Do the same titles to these lessons. If you don't have all these lessons set up, then once again, to create another lesson, you're going to go File, New, Sequence, and you want to make sure you're in AVC HD 1080i with the AVC HD 1030i 3060, because I film in 60i. And go ahead and let's get all that set up. It'll just be easier, and I want to make sure that you have it organized, because you're probably going to go back and take a look at these video lessons again and practice again. I want to make sure that lesson 1, 2, 3, 4 was not very descriptive, and this way you'll know exactly what we covered. So I'm going to stop it again, and when you're ready, you can go ahead and hit the start button. We're back to the lesson again, and you have all of these lesson bins set up along with the lesson sequences with these names, which will help you moving forward when we go back over these concepts. What I want you to do is that we are in lesson 7, BCC videoscope and BCC color balance part 2, and I'm going to expand on this, and we have 3 bits of film in here. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go into Explorer, and we've seen before my files are under Data, Camtasia Studio, Lesson Assets, and I want you to go into Lesson Set 1, which are these 2 files, the left and right, and we use these originally doing our first set of color correction. I want you to highlight both of these items and drag them and bring them into lesson 7. Then on lesson 1, that film, the third one right here, is actually located in lesson set number 2, wherever you wound up saving your download to. Let's get those 3 pieces of film. We've gone over this procedure numerous times. You should have it down by now. And then once you have these pieces of film in here, I want you to drag, in fact, I'll just get rid of all these so we can start fresh. Clear. I want you to drag the 380_0440 left to video track 2, and I want you to drag the 38_0440_R, which stands for the right eye, and bring that down in the video track 1. And then on lesson 1, let's grab this and drag it down and put it on the plane in video track 1 with some separation between these 2 pieces of video. Within here, I want us to turn around and now click on this video 2, and because we have a left-right eye, once again, we're going to have to go put the Vision 3 Imaging Inc. S3D plugin on here, and we'll go all the way down. Like we said, they're in alphabetical order, and we'll drag the S3D plugin. Because we have a left and right eye, we've seen this before. We're going to come in the primary layer. We assign the primary layer to none. We assign the secondary layer to 1. And now we have our left-right eye sign up, and we're going to go in and switch it to the left eye. Then we'll move over to this lesson 1.mp4 piece of video. And on here again, this is actually a left-right eye, the one that we had color corrected as part of lesson 1 color correction. Grab that quick S3D plugin, drag it over. Because it came in as a side-by-side, you don't have to do the primary and secondary layer because we don't have 2 separate streams, and let's just switch that to left. So now we have both of these pieces of video lined up, and I'm going to come in here at this point in time and shrink these QS3 plugins down so we don't have all those controls. And on this first piece of video, I'm going to click within the stream where it's at, and that's our original film that we had no color correction at all. And I want us to bring in the following controls, and they are going to be following effects, and they're going to be under the BCC color and tone. So I want us to bring in color balance, and let's click it off, the control. I want us to bring in safe colors. And let's turn that control off and shrink it down again. And then I want us to bring in BCC video scope that we just saw on the demonstration from Boris. And let's click over into the right plane. And in here, I want us to bring in BCC color balance. And once again, we'll turn it off and bring it down. And I want us to also bring in BCC video scope, and we'll leave that on. So let's go back over to first sets of clips. Let's click on this particular item here. Oh, one other item I want you to bring into this first set of clips is auto balance. And we're going to have to go up under video effects, adjust, and we're actually going to go into auto levels. Sorry. So I've just brought auto levels in, and now I want you to put your cursor, highlight all levels, and drag it up where it is above BCC color balance, the BCC safe colors, and the BCC video scope. And let's go ahead and turn off auto levels. Now, originally, when we wound up looking at these video scopes, and within here, let's click on the down arrow video scope, and let's turn all of the monitors off except for the RGB waveform. So let's go ahead and just turn these off except for the RGB waveform, and let's wind up looking at this here. And we see that here's our colors. When we go to color correct, we want to try to get all three of these colors, or the major portion of the colors, are relatively lined up, and clearly they're not lined up or straight across. And if we come along and turn on auto levels, look what happens. Adobe's technology goes through and tries to spread these colors to make them relatively similar. But if your program does not have something, let's say you're using Avid Media Composer or Final Cut Pro or Sony Vegas Pro, if they do not have a great function like auto levels, you're going to have to adjust this manually. So let's go ahead and wind up turning off auto levels. Let's go into color balance. And we're going to wind up shrinking down the video scope because we don't need all those controls up. And let's go into color balance. And we have RGB. And here's the three colors. RGB. Red, green, blue. Clearly my red is too low, so I'm going to ramp this up until I get my red where it's touching the top, but not overwhelming the top portion. So I kind of like it right there. Now my green clearly is too high, so I'm going to push that into the negative. Let's bring it about, let's say, right here. And the blue also winds up appearing too high, so I'm going to wind up adjusting that down. Manually, this is what we actually look like, and let's do some things. Let's turn this off and turn auto levels on. Let's turn this off and turn BCC color balance off. It looks like that we need a little more red in there. Let's go down here. Let's go to auto level. Auto levels is spreading the colors out much better. Once again, if you wind up using this black clip, which we said that we usually wind up setting that at about a 2 around in there, we see that we're getting, a much larger spread in the colors. And what happens is on the BCC color balance, you don't have that ability to adjust the black clip. And clearly we're like going that you don't want these things touching on the edges, so we're clearly kind of high up there. So we can see, as far as I'm concerned, the auto levels does a better job versus the manual adjustment, but I just wanted all of you to be aware that a lot of people turn around and say, first thing you're going to do is actually wind up adjusting your colors so they're relatively even, and that's what auto level does. But you have to be careful because on some of the clips, auto levels may not work, and you should always bring up your video scope to understand how it's doing the spread. And if it's not doing it properly, then you should not use auto levels, and you need to come in the color balance to then wind up adjusting these items manually and using your scopes until you get to the point that you feel that they're relatively similar and properly set up, and then you would start the color correction at that point. Now, auto levels is clearly doing a much better job of spreading these colors, but once again, on some shots, it is not going to work, and you're going to have to use BCC color balance to get that proper spread before we start going to the other color correction techniques and fixing our water and then fixing our coral using the matting system. Under that we may come in and wind up using that use saturation lightness command, or use another program called Colorista 2 to do very fine enhancements to the color. And then we may come back in with the color balance tool again to touch it up the way we want it. And that brings up an issue that they showed on the tutorial about our colors going to wind up being safe once we wind up making these color corrections. And usually what you do is that we are going to look at whether these colors are safe as we're turning around and completing our colorization. We would not do it at this point. I'm just going to wind up closing out of this item that we're not going to use safe colors on this right now. Let's go over to our second clip. And I'm sure that, and let's go ahead and turn the video scopes off. And I'm sure that you all remember this clip where we use saturation lightness and a matte based on the blue spectrum, the first correct a color. Then we came in and created another matte, and we turned around and inverted the matte to then use saturation lightness to only affect the coral. And then we even brought in color balance again to possibly ramp up some of the reds a little. So on here that this would be considered a relatively final clip, and that is where we're going to wind up coming into BCC video scope to see if this is complying with broadcast standards. You're not going to have to be concerned about broadcast standards if you're not commercially selling the product, or you're not trying to sell it to a television broadcast channel, but you are going to be concerned about if that is a potential market. As part of the demonstration we saw regarding the Boris FX demonstration, he was talking about broadcast safe. And what I can do is wind up clicking on this little arrow here, which says broadcast safe. And then in here that we're going to look at that we want a magenta pattern or a zebra pattern, that he was actually referring to those two. And then we'll go to our Luma range. And in here, we can turn around and wind up ramping this item down. In fact, I have to turn it on to get it to work. I'm just going to look at my RGB waveform. I'm going to get rid of the rest of these controls here. One of the things he talked about in the video lesson was that when it's at 100, you're not going to have that little red dot. But if you move it down a little, we're now getting a red dot, which means that our levels have now been adjusted to something less than 100%. We will use something, let's say, at 96%. I'm now going to wind up coming back in here to color balance, turning it on, and we can see that our colors have gone too high, and we're also seeing zebra appear here. So I'm going to come in and wind up now toning my reds down a little, and you notice that stuff is going away? I mean, if I bring it back to 0, let's see what happens. If I bring it back to 0, look at that right there. That's the zebra. And if we wind up coming into the video scope and I wind up adjusting, instead of a zebra pattern, the magenta, we can see the magentas there. And if we wind up taking the slider at 100%, it doesn't appear, but we always want to be just slightly a little less than 100%. And as we go farther and farther from the 100%, the magenta shows up. Or as we go farther and farther from the 100%, the zebra pattern shows up. What this means is you don't have to have, like you said, your scopes on to wind up being able to fix these problems. But I like to wind up having my scopes on because I try to adjust these colors down so that they're not going over the top. And I personally really enjoyed the magenta, the situation better. So I'm going to wind up trying to set this to, let's say, 99, something like that. So I'm 1% under the broadcast channel limitation, and I'm pretty close right now on here. So maybe I'm going to go -1. It's still there. I'm going to bring it down just a little more, -7, and bam. This says I'm within the broadcast channel, and I can bring my greens down a little, and I can bring my blue down just slightly. I'm going in there. I'll bring my blues down. And now they're all under the levels, and we're safe as far as the broadcast goes. Now, like if I start to ramp this down, all of a sudden you see that the magenta starts appearing again, but now it starts appearing. We have one little dot right here. It starts appearing at 94% instead of 100%. And what you want to do is make sure that these top edges of your red, green, and blue are not going above that top line. That means that you are now violating the standards based on where you have that slider at. And that's all he was really trying to explain to you. In fact, he had a higher level here, 98. We're clearly within those safe ranges, so we didn't really destroy our colorization to get it to the point where we are now broadcast ready. And that's what this entire lesson, what you really have got to be concerned about is that when you do your final colorization, that you actually wind up bringing the BCC video scope up, which has these controls down here for the broadcast safe. And it only takes a couple seconds. As soon as you get used to this, it's extremely fast. It's some of the final changes you have to do. Now, if you go into the red, green balance, blue balance, and it's still not correcting it, let me show you another tool you can actually use to wind up achieving that goal. And you're actually going to wind up coming into color correction, and you drag it over, and you have to bring the video scope below these. Remember that we talked about the video scope is going to register anything which is above it. And if you come into color correction, you have these additional fine controls, saturation, etc. And you can start playing with those controls, and that a lot of times will wind up fixing these issues you may encounter. That's what I want you to remember about this lesson right now. I know it was quite long and you saw a very structured tutorial on it. I do things a little simpler. It seems to work for me and it may work for you. You can either come in and wind up adjusting the original clip with auto levels, but you should have your, once again, I'm going to click on auto levels here. I'm going to take off color balance. You want to look at that spread, and if auto levels is doing a good spread, before you start to do color correction, go ahead and do it. If it doesn't, you're going to have to come in the color balance and then manually adjust the red, green, and blue to get these relatively across the board and similar. That is basically it. The BCC video scope, color balance, and auto levels, the way that you get the three to work in tandem together.